Now, people say, you know what, good enough. What Israel is counting on is that the whole issue of viability is so subtle and so detailed that the average person really doesn't care. You know what? They got their state. They got on 70% of the land. Leave it like that. That's what labor is trying to induce Sharon to do. But at any rate, you have the Jordan Valley settlements and 6 other settlement blocks that Israel won't give up, even though they could be shrunk conceivably. One is the Ariel block around the city of Ariel here that divides the West Bank east and west and also lies atop the largest water aquifer in the West Bank. Then you have what's called the Modi'in block that goes this way, that's around the city of Modi'in. Modi'in is today being built as the largest city in Israel. It's being built as a city larger than Tel Aviv, right in here. And that leads us into what's called Greater Jerusalem. 3 settlement blocks, Givat Ze'ev, Ma'ale Adumim, and Gush Etzion. And what's interesting, you see, where Sharon has succeeded, what does creating facts mean? It means physical facts. Settlements, cities, roads, physical presence. It's so massive and permanent you wouldn't think of moving it. But it also means cognitive facts that you internalize, so that you build Ma'ale Adumim as a city, a normal city, with normal streets and boulevards, everything banal every day, so that you internalize it, and after a while you can't imagine a landscape without Ma'ale Adumim. And to go further, you'd say, and if the Palestinians expect us to give up Ma'ale Adumim, which isn't a settlement even. Most Israelis do not consider Ma'ale Adumim a settlement, even though it's way across the 1967 border, because it's not ideological, it's not fanatical, it's not the land of Israel, it's just normal people living there for economic reasons. If the Palestinians are going to be so unreasonable as to make us give up Ma'ale Adumim, that proves that they don't really want peace. The whole thing gets turned around, so that in the Geneva Initiative, which is the most liberal that I don't know, Brit Tzedek and all kinds of liberal Jewish groups and your Senate and the senators from California, I don't know about from here, are all supporting, keeps the Ariel block, the Modi'in block, and Greater Jerusalem intact. It shrinks them a little bit, but they keep them basically intact. And then there's another settlement block coming up here, a salient from the south, coming up to the Jewish community in Hebron. So that the settlement blocks are becoming permanent, and Sharon just this week is asking American approval for actually annexing the settlement blocks. The 4th element in the matrix of control is the infrastructure. And here, what's important to understand, whether it's settlements or anything else, is the less dramatic an element is, to the point where you start to yawn. You talk about roads and land use patterns and zoning, and those are the most important, the most crucial elements. And the ones that are actually the most dramatic, especially the wall, for example, are often the least important, or at least less important than the other ones. What the infrastructure does, this 4th element is the infrastructure, which really physically incorporates the West Bank into Israel. It creates one unit, urban, a highway grid, electrical grid, a water system, one unit that is that's just integrated, that can't be, in which one piece can't be detached from the other. And since 1993, during the course of Oslo, Israel built a $3 billion highway system, a bypass road system that links the settlements into Israel proper. All paid for by you. Entirely paid for by the United States. So here we get Clinton somehow involved in this. I mean, where's Clinton when I mean, Clinton's not approving a $3 billion highway system in the West Bank linking the settlements if he has an idea that somehow there's going to be a just peace and a Palestinian state. What I've got to say is that the Democrats are certainly, not only aren't they better than the Republicans, but in most cases, probably this administration accepted, in most cases they're worse than the Republicans. When it did come to criticism from Eisenhower to James Baker to George the Father, the criticism, or the more critical approaches, the reassessment of Israel, withholding loan guarantees and so on, came from the Republicans, not from the Democrats. And you can see this here. So you've got the infrastructure, and that connects up to what's called the Trans-Israel Highway Project, a huge project being built in Israel today that moves the Israeli population eastward and creates a new spine to the country on which then this bypass road system can be built. Why is that significant? Among other things, the entire two-state approach, the two-state solution, rests on a north-south axis. That here's Israel, and alongside Israel you can get a Palestinian state. What the Trans-Israel Highway Project does with the bypass roads is it reconfigures the entire country to an east-west kind of an axis. The whole country is reconfigured so that what that means then is that the West Bank, instead of being on the side, alongside the state of Israel, becomes the very center of the country. So the Ariel becomes a part of the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, which overlaps with the Modi'in metropolitan area, which overlaps with the Jerusalem metropolitan area, and the West Bank becomes the very center of the country. And in addition to that, even though there might be some road going from Hebron to Jenin, basically each canton, and Sharon doesn't say Bantustan, but Sharon does say cantons. This is a cantonization plan that he's developed. So each canton, the northern canton, the central canton, and the southern canton become integrated east-west into Israel, so that the relationship of each canton to Israel is stronger than the relationship of each canton to the other. And finally in the matrix of control, we have the wall. Now the wall should certainly be opposed, and I've been very active, and it's very good the petitions going around. But in this whole scheme of things, the wall comes out to be not the most important element. The wall is sort of the nail in the coffin, we might say. What the wall does is it sets in concrete the Bantustan. Because as you can see from the logic of it, the wall follows areas A and B, and then when it hits a settlement block, it goes around the settlement block. And then it comes back to areas A and B, and then goes back around the settlement blocks. Greater Jerusalem remains intact, you see, and it goes like that. So essentially, it defines that Palestinian Bantustan. So where we get to in the end is this. It's like we say, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out where we're going with this whole thing. And that is basically, Sharon's idea is a 90%, 10% solution, where Israel has 90% of the country, and here, if you take areas A and B, you remove the settlement blocks, then you add the line of the wall, you get pretty much this 10% of the country that Israel is willing to give to the Palestinians, because it's our country and we decide what to do with it, unilaterally. Now again, Labor would like to have a larger Bantustan. So Labor would sort of fill in some of these gaps, not on the western side, but on the eastern side. But the concept is the same. So where that leads us then is to ask, so where are we with all of this? And that's what I want to suggest to you. What the problem that we have in the Israeli peace movement, and I think a problem facing the Palestinians, is we don't have a program to sell. We don't have something to advocate for today, in a sense. If you would ask me a year ago, 6 months ago, all right, what do you want from me? What's the campaign? I would say the campaign is a campaign to end the occupation and to get a viable Palestinian state and to have a two-state solution. I don't believe that's possible anymore. I think that and more Israelis and Palestinians are saying this, that the whole enterprise has passed the point of no return. We are not going to end the occupation, and therefore we're faced with a couple options. Either, and this is the problem, I think, with groups that are adopting the Geneva Initiative. You know, people so much want a two-state solution that the problem is we're willing to compromise to a point where we could be advocating for apartheid. The problem is not a Palestinian state. The Palestinians can get this state tomorrow morning. I'm telling you, Sharon would be very happy to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, drive his own car to Ramallah, and sign off on this state with Arafat. Tomorrow morning he'd do that. The question is the issue of viability. A viable Palestinian state and not a Bantustan. And the problem for us is that if we don't know the map, if we don't specify what viability means, if we don't explain why the occupation has to end in its entirety, we're liable to be advocating for apartheid. For a two-state solution that's really an apartheid solution, which I don't think we want to do. And therefore, we're put in a very difficult situation. If Sharon says there'll be a Palestinian state, in the Israeli peace movement, we have to come up and say no. There should not be a Palestinian state, at least not that Palestinian state, which all of a sudden puts us in a very difficult situation. There's two alternatives, both of which are pretty impossible. One is a one-state solution. In other words, if we accept the idea that we are not going to end the occupation, and at the same time we're not going to accept apartheid, then where are we? Well, one solution is a one-state solution, which is in the air. Abu Allah talked about it a couple weeks ago. Abu Allah said that if Sharon goes through with his unilateral disengagement plan, we will declare for a single state. Now, this changes the whole struggle absolutely, fundamentally. On the one hand, of course, it means the end of Israel as a Jewish state, the end of Zionism. And what's interesting is the right wing in Israel is all of a sudden confronting this. And that's why Sharon is going unilateral now. Because all these years, the peace movement has asked the Labour and Likud governments, where are you going with all this? You're building settlements, you're building roads, you're doing this, you're going permanent. Where's it all going? And they never had an answer because it was always an ongoing enterprise. I think what the wall has done is it's brought it all to a head. All of a sudden, everybody in Israel and among the Palestinians, including the right wing in Israel, is all of a sudden confronted with the fact that, hey, we did it. We did it. We made our presence, our occupation permanent. We foreclosed a viable Palestinian. Now what? Now what do we do? And since there's nothing else to do, there's nothing to offer the Palestinians, no negotiation is possible, there's nothing more that the Palestinians can accept, Sharon is now saying, okay, we're going to finish this by establishing a Palestinian state. And Sharon has said, I'll go down in history as the one that founded the Palestinian state. The Palestinians never got a state from Jordan, they never got a state from Egypt, they never got a state from the Ottoman Turks, they never got a state from the British. Here, the Israelis are the ones that finally give the Palestinians their independence. I mean, you can give a spin on this thing that sounds fantastic, you see, and if you don't get into the issue of viability, it sounds great. So that's the only option, but assuming that that's not acceptable, that means then that Israel is facing the end by its own hand. Israel has made this one state, and if the Palestinians demand equal rights, like in South Africa, The right wing itself is saying that's the end.